How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Dish podcast. I will be your host, Brett Twellmeyer, sports editor, and I'll have my co-hosts introduce themselves.
What's up, guys? Assistant sports editor Pavel Markovic back with you.
Katie Schaefer, sports reporter.
And I'm Ford Griffith, sports reporter.
Well, it's been a while since we've had one of these episodes, so we've got quite a few games to go over. The men have had 3 games, women have had 4 games. Let's just dive right into this first men's game. Iowa State, number 5, Iowa State takes down Mississippi Valley State, 83-44, and this was obviously a game that we just expected Iowa State to win. Mississippi Valley State kind of in like a rebuild type of situation, just not a great team, and Iowa State just took care of business like they should have.
Yeah, this is the game to really see those newcomers come in, the additions to the front court and obviously the returners from the back court. And it was just, I think it started off a little bit slow, but then obviously it got to pick up the pace like every other game has kind of gone so far. I mean, except this past game against IU Indianapolis where they started off hot immediately. But nonetheless, had some great performances, obviously, from Keyshawn and Taman, obviously the 2 main backcourt guys. And then we got to talk about Joshua Jefferson, the transfer from St. Mary's, got 10 points and 4 steals in his and 6 rebounds in his first game against Mississippi Valley State.
Yeah, he's been a really big piece so far for Iowa State, I would say. Third game, which we'll get to in a minute, had his first double-double with the Cyclones. Played 20 minutes in game 1, though, shot 4 for 6 from the field. He tried a 3, didn't go in, but, I bet he'll make like at least 1 this season. But obviously a piece that can be used everywhere. I was a little surprised when I saw him in the starting lineup, but I think that he's already found his place there down low with Deshaun Jackson. I think that duo is just going to get stronger throughout the season.
Yeah, I think this pair of duo like in the front court will be probably better than what we've seen last year. I know there wasn't really a true duo, I guess, with either Hassan Ward, Rob Jones, or Trey King. But yeah, I really liked through 3 games so far what Joshua Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson have been able to do in the starting lineup in only 3 games has been really fun to watch.
And I feel like Deshaun can be a better player than Rob Jones was. I think that skill-wise he's a bit better. I think that free throw-wise he's going to be better. We saw him have some pretty big blocks. He's able to rebound it very well. He even had some assists too.
Yeah, they both got big to start off their nicknames. They got Big Rob and now Big Dog.
Big Dog
Jackson. Deshaun Jackson's been a phenomenal get from the transfer portal.
What I did like about the opening game was that everybody got minutes. The unfortunate part was Conrad Hawley played for a minute in the game, injures his shoulder, it pops out, and he's out either indefinitely or just for the whole year.
Indefinitely.
Yeah. Unfortunate situation there. But, he'll still be that bench guy hyping everybody up.
Yeah. He wasn't really going to get a lot of playing time anyway, so it didn't really affect him that way. But still, he's still going to be there as the main bench guy. And it's clearly has shown the past 3 games he's still, giving teammates advice, hyping them up like usual. So I feel like they're not missing a step right there. It's just Conrad Hawley, and he's first 3 games, we probably could have seen him more just because of the way it was able to become more of a blowout.
The thing I did think was a little alarming in the first game was that 3-point percentage. It was really low. I know that TJ over the offseason had kind of talked to a lot of guys, shoot the ball more, Milan especially, and I'm glad that he got some shots off in that game, but finished 2 for 7, but I feel like it's a matter of time before they just really start to fall.
Yeah, and it kind of showed more in this most recent game against IU Indianapolis, I feel like, and then even the one against Kansas City, too, where Milan and Curtis Jones are able to perform really well. But, yeah, I feel like this first game, kind of had a lot of bumps and bruises, but ended up getting ironed out. And eventually, as these games keep going on and will continue to go on through this non-conference season. But, yeah, I wish we saw a little bit more threes go in because, Milan took the most amount of threes in this game against Mississippi Valley State, but only made 2 of those 7, so... Yeah. You wish you could see a bit better from making them.
Overall, though, a big win, nearly 40 points. And then a week later, first 3 games were all on Mondays, which is a little odd. Yeah. I thought 1 game a week, all on the same day. But I guess it kind of establishes a rhythm sort of thing. Second game of the season, Iowa State does fall to 7th in the rankings after the win over Mississippi Valley State, which I thought was a little odd. Could have been because they played 1 game versus other teams. It definitely was,
yeah.
Nonetheless, they take on Kansas City, take them down 82-56, and Curtis Jones really went off in this one.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about what happened last game. He ended up being in the starting lineup over Milan Momcilovic. But now we see in the second game, Milan got the start over Curtis Jones, and you see both of them. I feel like this is the perfect spot for Curtis to shine because you saw what he's able to do in the starting lineup in the first game, and then the second game, and now the third game, back-to-back 20-point performances. He is the perfect bench spark that this team needed and had obviously last year. And I feel like both the roles, I feel like right now, both Milan starting and Curtis Jones should stay just because of the amount of impact they put in.
And TJ keeps on talking about it, that everyone's going to play starting minutes, especially like Curtis Jones, Milan Momcilovic. He said it doesn't really matter who starts. They've said it too. They don't really care. But I think that having Milan start, Curtis Jones come in off the bench, has proven to be better through 3 games. And I think that they might be more used to it too, because Milan started every game last year. Curtis Jones came off the bench last year. I think just sticking with that is just the way to go.
Yeah, it's what fits. And I know TJ tried to try something new at the first game, but then like you obviously saw, we still won, but at the same time, like Curtis didn't perform as well. At least didn't shoot as well from when he was starting compared to when he's off the bench. So even though Curtis doesn't always get to start off the game, he still plays a lot of starter minutes compared to like the other players. So he shouldn't be. I don't think he's been complaining like when we've been talking in post game. He's kind of like, whatever they want me to do, I'll do. So I think he's just perfect for that bench spot. And then Milan in the starting lineup, in this Kansas City game had his best game shooting too. Shot the same amount of 3-pointers, but made 2 more and finished with 16 points, which is just behind Curtis Jones' 20. So I like what I saw in terms of a bounce back game from him, Milan.
Yeah, that duo is going to be strong this year. They both led scoring in that game. They both led minutes. Milan had 30 and Jones had 29. So they're doing strong so far. Another big win for Iowa State over Kansas City. And then most recently, this past Monday, Iowa State moved back up to number 5 in the rankings, takes down IU Indianapolis, formerly IUPUI, 87-52. This one, Iowa State had its best start to a game by far this season. They kind of got off a little slow, it felt like, in the first 2, but this one, off to like, a 27-5 run or something like that to start the game. It was nuts.
Yeah, and especially led by, again, Curtis Jones. Obviously, when you look at his final performance, 7 for 14, 4 for 10 from 3, it doesn't look like he had the best game in terms of shooting. But when you realize he started off 4 for 4, 3 for 3 from 3-pointers, like that's what kind of led this Iowa State charge. And I think he had like 11 points during like that 13-0 run or something. Like he led
did.
his own.
Yep, he had his own personal 11-0 run once he got into the game for the first time.
It was unbelievable. It was like, I feel like that's the most like, I would say the best offensive game we've watched this season. I can't even go into last season too, because everyone was shooting very, very well against this IU Indianapolis team, and I felt like everything just worked. 2 guys had double-digit rebounds, one had a double-double, Joshua Jefferson, and I feel like one of those great games.
Yeah, Joshua Jefferson also shot perfect from the floor. There was that one shot, got blocked. They call on the stat sheet, they originally had it as a miss, but then they went back and changed it. And I'm glad they did, because I like that they kept him with his perfect game.
Yeah, and I felt like it was more of a block than a missed shot. That was kind of just like the defender batted away before he had a real chance to actually shoot the ball. So they ended up making the right stat correction and ended up being the perfect game for Joshua Jefferson.
Yeah. I feel like in terms of team play, guard play especially, this was probably the strongest. All of them looked scoring-wise. When you look at Curtis Jones leading scoring again with his second 20-point game in a row, Taman Lipsey was 17. He was kind of the head of the snake, as TJ said. He had 5 steals in the game. And then you had Keyshawn Gilbert also with 11 points. So those guys are starting to click, and they're only really going to get stronger from here, just like last year.
And especially like what we're about to talk a little bit is the Maui Invitational, where that's probably the toughest test that they'll have all season. I know the conference play will provide a tough test, but still, like, this will probably just the caliber amount of teams that they'll have to play, especially starting off with number 4 Auburn. It'll be everyone will need to be on the same page. Everyone need to be clicking, making their shots, obviously, to try and like perform well in this tournament, because it is such a strong bracket.
Yeah, there's a lot of top 10, top 5 teams in there. UConn is the
natty champs are in there. But luckily we don't have to play them until the final game of the schedule. We're not in the same bracket as them. We have to start with Auburn and then either play North Carolina or Dayton, which will probably be North Carolina if we somehow beat Auburn. But it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. It's really like I said, the toughest test. It'll be like, I feel like the most competitive, obviously, because these 3 non-conference teams are just random. Kind of thrown in there to give Iowa State these like freebies, see what the team looks like, meshes with like a little bit. But this one will be like the real test. Yeah,
we'll get into that a little bit more later. But I want to get to Curtis Jones a little bit more. He started the game 4 for 4 shooting, but then after that he kind of cooled off a little bit. It felt like he went 1 for 6 after that, and then kind of mellowed out towards the end. Finished 7 for 14 shooting, which is still a good shooting night nonetheless. He shot 50%. The team as a whole shot 50%. It did feel like at times, though, especially later after those runs kind of started to not happen as much. In the second half especially, the offense kind of slowed. If they weren't scoring in transition or off of turnovers, they weren't really scoring at all. So I think that might be something they might want to look at. But nonetheless, the defense is still doing what it needs to do. They're scoring in transition, they're getting turnovers, and they're still winning games.
Yeah, and I feel like one of those tidbits that could be applied is like the first half they shot 5 for 10 from three-pointer, 50%, and the second half only 2 for 15 with 13.3 continuing percentage. So you want to see that obviously uptick because even though you're playing against a team like IU in Indianapolis, they still kind of somewhat kept it close, I feel like, so it wasn't like a true blowout, but still like you shouldn't have to take your foot off the gas as much as they did, I feel like, and it kind of resulted in some missed shots. So I feel like they got to have that's still the same continuous from the first half to roll through the entire game, not just play half the game. So and then it'll matter more, obviously, come tougher games.
Of the first 3 games, who's been your top player or like your best player to watch so far?
It's got to be I'm going to stray away from Curtis Jones. I'll let you have that one if you want. But I'm going to say Taman Lipsy because, consistent player. I know second game he didn't reach double-digit points, I think. But still, nonetheless, making it up on the defensive end, having 5 steals against IU Indianapolis, and plus still shooting the ball consistently well, even with the second game not resulting in double-digit points. And, I feel like he's really the leader of this team, has been kind of last season as he emerged as one of those guys. So, yeah, I feel like, and I think it will sustain throughout the rest of the season, too, as one of those bigger guys.
I like what you did with leaving me with Curtis Jones. I get why you did that, but I'm actually going to go with Joshua Jefferson.
Ooh, okay.
He got his double-double last week. That's something that TJ saw last year that he did at St. Mary's. He had 4 of them there. I feel like he can get more this season. He's already got 1. I mean, he can definitely do it again. But the fact that he's able to make his shots down low, he's a big presence down low with Deshaun Jackson. He can score, he can rebound, and he even had 4 assists in the last game too. He also had a steal. This guy's doing it all right now. He's kind of being like that Swiss Army knife that this team might need. So he's been my guy to watch so far. I've really liked what Joshua Jefferson has brought to this team.
Yeah, and I don't think really Iowa State had that kind of Swiss Army knife type of player last year. This is one of those key additions that, is probably going to be a statement coming through Big 12 conference play too, because you kind of need a guy like that that can kind of do a little bit of everything, especially at his size too. Like, I'm surprised how quick he can move, how defensive minded he is, and he can score too, obviously, with the perfect game. So I think he was probably the perfect addition for this Cyclones team. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of all we have for the men's team, but the women's team also had 4 games, so we'll throw it over there to Ford and Katie. How did they're 4-0, but how did they get there?
Yeah, the first game, a 96-56 win over Chicago State. It was expected, but the Cyclones held Chicago State to 3 points in the first quarter, which was crazy. The Chicago State hit their first bucket with seconds left on the clock. So defensively, they played really well, and they were able to hold on to that lead the rest of the way.
I think offensively, they also did pretty good. Eiley Tankey started, which was something I was not expecting, to be honest. She did great. She totally fulfilled her role, but she just wasn't a player that I was expecting to be the 5th. But yeah, no surprise that we won. Chicago State really lacked experience. They were really sloppy. I said that throughout the game. It almost seemed like they were rushing when we got such a high lead early on. They were just trying to get the ball anywhere they could, and it just got rushed, and they were just throwing the ball around, not really having an aim. Sure. But yeah, Addie Brown walked away. She did great. She walked away with, I think, a team high of 20 points. No surprise there. She did great.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Addie Brown and Audie Crooks, they were the leading scorers expectedly. And they both hit 6 free throws. Addie shot 7, Audie shot 8. And for them to be able to shoot free throws at a high percentage this year will be super important. Both of them take such a high volume of shots from down low in the paint, and so they're going to get fouled. So for them to be able to hit those shots on at a consistent rate will be very beneficial to this team. And then in the second game, they played Indiana State. The Cyclones didn't shoot the ball very well in that game. They shot around, I think it was 30%, something like that. And Coach Fennelly talked a lot about that in the post game, how that was one of the worst shooting nights he's seen for his teams. But they still had a 20-point win.
Yeah, we won 64-42, and I mean, we did switch to a very high, we did switch defensively pretty quickly on. It became a big reliant, mostly because I think zone-to-zone defense, as you mentioned early on, on Audie, which Coach mentioned they have not practiced a lot with, which I thought was really surprising because Audie is one of our star players, and kind of with other teams looking in and seeing our tapes and everything, it's surprising that we haven't. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. But yeah, you were talking about the zone defense, and it's really tough when you're not hitting threes against the zone defense because, I mean, when Audie's down there getting double teamed and has 3 people around her, her only option is to kick it out to shooters. And when we shoot 8 for 36 from 3, that's not going to score a lot of points. But you touched on the defense and how they played. Audie had I'm pretty sure it was a career high 3 blocks and 10 total team blocks, which was very helpful. I mean, Indiana State couldn't get anything going either. They shot 25% from the field. So it's very easy to win when your opponent shoots 25%. And even though Iowa State shot 30, it was still a dominant win. And then in Game 3 against Southern, 84-56 win. I wasn't at that one, but you were, Katie. What's the takeaway you have from that one?
I thought that was a really good game. We won 84-56. Audie and Addie both had double-doubles. Addie recorded her second straight double-double, the 12th of her career. She led the whole night, taking home 21 points. After the first quarter, I did see a switch in the defense on Crooks as they double-teamed her, which is not surprised because she led the first half with her layups and points in the paint. They did have a 17-0 point lead in the first 5.5 minutes. Although the double teaming did damage us a little bit because Crooks, it damaged us a little bit more just because the players around the perimeter just aren't fully capable yet of making all those threes. And I think that definitely damaged us a little bit, but we did out-rebound the Jaguars 50-25, which is the largest margin they have had all season. And, I thought it was a pretty good game.
For sure. And Emily Ryan recorded 10 assists, and she's currently tied for first in the nation for assists per game with 9. Her being able to distribute that ball, being the experienced player that she is, will be a key for this team, especially with some newcomers who are still adjusting to the system. For her to be able to run that offense as well as she does will be just a key piece for them, especially when Audie and Addie need somebody to get them the ball down low or just like on the wing, wherever they need it.
Yeah, no, she's definitely been a key player that I always have my eye on. She's very easy to spot. She is so good ball handling, and she knows her plays so well. It's always surprising. She always has a plan before you even think of anything, and it's always surprising where the ball is going to go, but I'm almost 100% confident that Emily Ryan has a plan, and it'll be distributed perfectly.
Yeah. And then the most recent game against St. Thomas, the Cyclones won 80-47. This was the Audie Crooks game. Addie Brown, Coach Fenn talked about how she was a little sick, so she didn't play as much as she usually would have. Didn't feel great going into it. But Audie Crooks shot 12 for 17. Her most efficient game, 26 points. What do you think about that game?
I thought that was a great game. She did mention in the postgame she had new offensive moves, and you definitely saw that on the court. Mackenzie Hare started, which, again, is a transfer. Right, she's a transfer. So that was really fun to see. I thought she did great defensively. This is the second game she started. And the first game against Southern, I didn't see much of her on the court just because she didn't really catch my eye. But this game, she did great. She did great defensively. Her and AJ did great. Coach even mentioned how they were 2 people that you don't want to get on the wrong side of.
Sure. Yeah, I think those 2, even when their scoring might not show it, or they might not show up that much in the stat sheet, their defense on the opposing team's point guard, whoever the star player is, it's just so pestering and so annoying for the ball handler that it really turns into offense. It really creates these transition opportunities that gives us easy buckets. And Emily Ryan had 13 assists. She had 6 or 7 in the first quarter. It was actually crazy to see how fast that number went up. And for her to do that at the rate that she can. I mean, it's easy when you have Audie Crooks down low who you can just dump it off to and get an easy layup, but that's a crazy number to reach. She had 5 turnovers, but she's passing the ball a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sydney Harris has been somebody that's really surprised me. She's a TCU transfer, her 3rd team that she's been on now, and she's really taken her role as the 6th man or just coming off the bench really well, and she's shooting the ball really well, over 50% shooting, over 50% from 3.
Mm-hmm.
She's a great player off the bench.
No, when ever she's subbed in, you always know that she's going to be able to make her threes, and that's always a big reliant. Even her twos, she was great around the perimeter. Just overall a great player.
Yeah, and in the Indiana State game, she was great.
Mm-hmm.
She was kind of the person that first initially was able to break the zone. She was right in the middle, just in the sweet spot where the zone wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So she knocked down 2 mid-range shots, and to have somebody that can hit jumpers consistently, even when shots may not be falling, because that was a game when we shot 30%. To have somebody that can always knock down shots is going to be a key piece for this team heading into tougher games like South Carolina pretty soon here.
Mm-hmm. Especially because Indiana State was so good with their transitions.
For sure.
And they had some very fast breaking points.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting about Sydney Harris when she talked at media availability the other day was that she had an opportunity to come to Iowa State when she transferred to TCU. So I thought it was interesting that now, second time around, she decides to come here. But I think it's worked out for her really well. For sure. Yeah, she's been one that I've enjoyed watching this season too.
She reminds me a lot of Curtis Jones on the men's side, coming
True,
off the bench, being that kind of bench spark, being able to consistently score and kind of do a little bit of everything too is kind of one of those good things you kind of need. One of those spark plugs off the bench you kind of really need.
So yeah, first part of the season is sort of over, I would say, on the men's side. Women's team does have a couple more games, I would say, before their first real big test against South Carolina. A couple in-state games, including their first road game.
Yeah, I think Northern Iowa playing on the road will be a great test for the newcomers, especially whether that's freshmen or transfers, to really, I guess, I don't know how to say it, but just a test to see to react to away crowds and really play in front of a different team that's not cheering for you.
Mm-hmm. They're definitely very prepared for it. I think it's more based on if their emotions are going to get in the way of it, because this is going to be an in-state rivalry game, if they can handle the pressure, which I think they can. But
yeah, and Iowa State has been holding opponents to 28% shooting from the field, while Northern Iowa is shooting nearly 50% as a team.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be a key piece for this game, just to see if Iowa State, if it's their good defense or if it's just not the best opponents that's making them shoot 28%.
Mm-hmm. I think one of their best players is guard Maya McDermott, who has a season high of 22 points.
Yeah, and Northern Iowa was second in the Missouri Valley Conference preseason poll, so I think that'll be interesting because I'm sure that their fans are pretty excited for their season, especially an in-state game. They'll probably show out for this one.
No, for sure.
And then heading back to Ames against Drake, this is a game that Iowa State really needs to come out with an intense mentality, probably more than any other game that they've played this year, especially since Drake beat them last year.
Mm-hmm. I honestly think it's going to be a little bit similar to you and I. I think it's just going to be based off emotions. I don't think it's very competitive, but Coach mentioned on media availability that their in-state games are more competitive.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more hostile. I know it's a home game against Drake, but even then, Drake has only two losses, an 8-point loss to Creighton and a 13-point loss to Iowa. So I think it'll be interesting, since they were first in the Missouri Valley Conference preseason poll, to see how they can kind of handle Audie Crooks and Addie Brown. That tandem should get a lot of the workload like they will the rest of the season, but this will be the first game where I think those two will really be the key points, every possession down the floor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
3 players scored 20 against the Cyclones last year for Drake, including Katie Dinnebier, who's averaging nearly 20 points this year. I think that'll be a key focus point for AJ and Kenzie Hare defensively. And, I mean, the way that they've been playing defense, I think they'll do great on her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe that Dennebeer scored 40 against Iowa. Yeah. So she'll be a problem. Obviously, Pavel and I were there at the Drake game last year when they played in Des Moines and couldn't get the win. But, again, it was early in the season. So I'll be interested to see how they handle this first road test with UNI. Obviously, Drake was their first road game last year and they lost. They've got redemption in a different road game against an in-state rival and against Drake at home this year. So definitely an interesting week for sure for the women's team. Back over to the men's side, Maui Invitational Week, everybody. Huge tournament. This is probably of the Thanksgiving week tournaments, this is probably the one that probably has the best slate of teams, I would say. A lot of high-quality opponents. I mean, you've got UConn, North Carolina, Auburn, and the Iowa State Cyclones a part of this. You also got Michigan State, Tom Izzo's team, always a tough opponent. You also got Colorado, so another Big 12 schools in there. Dayton, who's always kind of around there at tournament time, it seems, every year. And then you got Memphis, Tyrese Hunter's new team, former Cyclone, ex-Longhorn as well. But Iowa State starts on Monday against Auburn. This one's going to be tough. It's the reigning Big 12 champs versus the reigning SEC champs.
Yeah, I mean, when you just mentioned those teams first off, it's kind of like we talked about, kind of a gauntlet. Like, especially 3 of those 4 teams that you mentioned are on one side of the bracket. It seems like, I know Michigan State with Tom Izzo and then Colorado and Memphis, like, they could give UConn some fits, but I doubt they're going to actually do really much in the end. But, yeah, nonetheless, Iowa State does start with number 4 Auburn, and they've looked really impressive so far, The one thing I can note, like, off the top of my head from this Auburn team was that incident on the plane to Houston, which is, I thought was a little odd because I thought, like, they had to land the plane because some players are fighting. There was some ruckus, Houston, neither here nor there, but still when they did play Houston, they played them at Houston and ended up winning by 5. So, Houston is a really tough opponent. Obviously, Iowa State's played them twice last year, or technically 3 times in the Big 12 championship game, but yeah, nonetheless, it was a really tight game, I feel like, and, Auburn really showcased its ability to kind of pull ahead in the end, and, it's going to be interesting to see how this Iowa State team does against this kind of Auburn team, because I know they're a lot more scoring team. I feel like every other conference besides the Big 12 is more focused on scoring rather than playing a lot more defensive-based games, so, yeah, I mean, they're led by Johnny Broom, who's exactly averaging 20 points per game and 11 rebounds per game, so a double-double per game. It'll be kind of a tough test for the Cyclones to kind of guard him in this Auburn team.
Yeah, I feel like Joshua Jefferson's probably going to be lined up with him, both forwards, so that'll be a really good test, I think, for Joshua Jefferson. I mean, I know he's played against Gonzaga in the past, but to get a player like Broom this early in the season, it's going to be like, hey, this is the type of people you're going to be playing in Big 12 league play.
Yeah, and
it'll be a good test for him. Again, playing Houston, that's a tough game that Auburn had. That's a tough game that they won. I mean, Houston was one of the best teams last year. Auburn was too, but that's a huge win to have right out of the gate in the season. So this Auburn team is definitely scary. They're Ken Pom number 1 as well.
Yeah, it doesn't help our case, especially that we have to start off with a team like Auburn, who is this type of caliber team to start off this tournament. But, I feel like if they do somehow make it past Auburn, which I think it probably will be one of those closer games just because of the caliber that Auburn is able to play against these Big 12 teams, like what they did against Houston. So, I mean, it's kind of a coin flip for me. I think I do have confidence in picking the Cyclones as of now, but I don't doubt Auburn's abilities to try and pull it off.
Yeah, we can cut here. Fuck.
Cut.
Okay. Yeah, they've got 5 players that score in double figures, so that's kind of scary. They can definitely score the ball really well. It'll be a good test for Iowa State's defense. Cyclones are giving up about like 50 points per game, so there'll be a good discrepancy there. I know Iowa State hasn't played a quality opponent yet. Auburn already has, and I think that may give the Tigers an edge in this game, being that they've played a top-tier team and Iowa State hasn't. So that's kind of something that has me a little bit worried for Iowa State, to be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things that you're used to playing these lower caliber teams and blowing them out. But then all of a sudden you hit the good team, like, oh, what's going on? Like, Auburn played Houston the second game of the season, so that's kind of a good place to start off with a good team. Obviously the first game of the season maybe, but I think it's better to start off with one of those lower caliber teams that you kind of blow them out. Get an understanding of your team, especially with new transfers and such. But yeah, especially with the way they played against Houston, I don't know. I feel like you said, give them the edge. So we'll see. I mean, it's kind of those gambles.
Yeah, but we'll just see how it goes, I guess.
Mhm.
It'll be a really tough matchup. Should Iowa State win or lose, the Cyclones will take on either North Carolina or Dayton. We can look at North Carolina first. They'll likely end up beating Dayton, I would assume.
Yeah.
North Carolina is 2-1 right now, but that one loss was by 3 points, I believe, was overtime at Kansas.
Yeah. And
Tough place to play.
Yeah, number 1 ranked team in the nation. You
Mhm.
know, like you said, toughest place to play. The top 10 matchup, and yeah, you know, they're Kansas. You know,
Yeah.
kind of expect this from them, but nonetheless, you know, North Carolina still put up a really good fight against this Kansas team, but still, you know, only losing by 3, I don't think is really that big of a defeat, just because of how much they were lost by. You know, if they lost by like 10 plus, I'd be like, yeah, this is kind of not good. But
Well, they were down by a lot. I mean, they were
Yeah.
down by like nearly 20 points and had to claw their way back. I was shocked they did.
yeah, they were down by 15 at halftime. You know, it's kind of get worse, but you know, they scored 51 points in the second half to kind of try and mount that comeback. But you know, a little bit too little, too late type of situation. But you know, nonetheless, you know, North Carolina, assuming that they do beat Dayton, you know, they are 2-1, still have played 3 games like us. But then again, it starts that conversation of they've played a top 10 team like
Right.
Auburn did, so they kind of have that edge to start off that. But you know, kind of going into this North Carolina team of who specifically, you know, they have that returning guard IJ Davis, who will pose a problem obviously, but you know, their 3 leading scorers are 3 guards who all average 15 points or points per game. But I feel like our guards, in terms of like playing good stout defense, should be able to at least lock down if 2 of the 3. I feel like.
Taman Lipsey versus RJ Davis is going to be a good matchup if it does
that'll be
happen.
fun.
Yeah, just because of Taman's defensive abilities, able to get multiple steals per game at this point. RJ Davis is a really good scorer. He can distribute the ball really well. I don't think he's as good defensively as Taman is, so that could be a bit of a difference between the two. If Iowa State, North Carolina do end up facing off, whether it's in the winner's bracket or the losing bracket, I don't know who I would pick, honestly. I feel like it could really go either way. I might end up picking the Cyclones, though. I just feel like I'm gonna go back to the Kansas. I know Kansas is a different team this year. Iowa State beat Kansas last year. North Carolina just lost to them. That's the only thing I'm going off of that would give me any reason to pick either of these teams if they do play each other.
Yeah, and I like kind of go back to the Auburn thing. I feel like more it's like a coin flip for me as well. You know, I do think the Cyclones could beat this North Carolina team like they did previously before. I know it's not this season, but still like last season and such. But regardless, you know, compared to North Carolina and Auburn, you know, North Carolina has more scoring from their guards compared to Auburn, who has more bigger guys who are leading the charge of scoring while the guards are still performing well too. So, you know, it's going to kind of 2 different teams, obviously, of the way they play. So it's going to be interesting to watch if we do play North Carolina. But, yeah, I still feel like would pick us to win, but maybe it's, again, probably a closer game.
Yeah. And then there's also Dayton, who Iowa State could play as well. They're 4-0. They beat Northwestern. That's the only, like, Power 4, Power 5 team they've played. They're beatable.
Yeah, I mean, look at their margin of victories. You know, besides the 30-point win over St. Francis, you know, only beating Northwestern by 5, only beating Ball State by, 8 points, and then Capital, 21 points. So, yeah, this team is very beatable. I feel like we wouldn't have to face them unless we lose to Auburn, because the Tar Heels should beat down on the Dayton Flyers. I mean, they only have 3 guys over double-digit points per game, you know. The leading guy is Enoch Cheeks. So,
What a name.
Yeah, I know, what a name, you know. But nonetheless, you know, I feel like, again, like Taman Lipsey, if we do have to play, Dayton should lock down Cheeks. And then it leads to Key and Malachi Smith. So I don't think there's really much to talk about here. I feel like this is one of the margins of victory that could be bigger for the Cyclones other than North Carolina and Auburn, because the level of Dayton to North Carolina and Auburn is like so significant. It's kind of like whatever, but you know, we'll see. We have to obviously focus on Auburn first, but if we were to play Dayton, I think it's going to be a bigger victory.
It's a tough road the whole way. I feel like if Iowa State does lose to Auburn, they will probably end up placing 5th, assuming that North Carolina beats Dayton, which they likely will. If Iowa State does end up beating Auburn, I'm skeptical if they can beat North Carolina, and if they do end up making the championship round, it's going to be UConn. Like, let's be real here. It's going to be UConn. I mean, 2-time reigning national champions. Dan Hurley has built something there that obviously works. UConn is the team that breaks the system every year when you look at like the March Madness type of thing of what teams win. But I don't know. I just feel like UConn's probably going to roll through this. They've got the easy side of the bracket, it feels like, and it's kind of a gauntlet on the other side. So the other teams might beat up on each other, and that could definitely pave the way for UConn. So I'm feeling like Iowa State's probably going to finish either, I don't know, I'd say second, third, or fifth probably.
Yeah, I have to agree. One of those placements, I feel like the lowest it probably goes sixth or something like that, because I don't think they'll be one of the bottom teams in this tournament, but I don't think they're going to win the whole thing because UConn's too good of a team. Thank God we don't have to play them in the Big 12 Big East battle, because luckily we do play Marquette, who is also a tough challenge, but
it's at home though.
That's also at home, right after the tournament. But thankfully UConn does not have to come our way, because oh boy, I would be scared.
This is a really good early season test, because I feel like last season Iowa State's ranking, their placement in the NCAA tournament wasn't that good because of their non-conference schedule. It just wasn't strong, let's be honest. And now you're playing Auburn, you got the possibility to play North Carolina and UConn and Marquette 4 games in a row. You've also got Iowa there, who's kind of, they could sneak into the tournament, but I mean, maybe not. It feels like a stronger non-conference slate. And I feel like that's something that even Jamie Pollard, who was a part of selecting the tournament teams and placing them last year, he brought that up too. He said that he honestly felt like Iowa State didn't have that strong of a non-conference schedule. So I thought that was kind of interesting that was brought up. I feel like that might be why they've scheduled these type of teams this year.
Yeah, this is what it is, like we talked about Pollard and what his thoughts were, but yeah, it's kind of just how the ball rolls. Well, obviously this tournament is probably the biggest thing they'll have to face all year before heading to March Madness, because who knows who's going to be where and such. But yeah, I think this is the perfect test for the Cyclones team to determine whether or not they are like living up to these expectations of being one of those top 10 teams, and if not, then it's going to be some sort of fall. I'm going to say that.
Speaking of tests, the women's team has a huge test on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think playing against a team that went undefeated last year, won the championship, it's going to be very tough. Very tough to say the least.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous for this game.
For sure. I mean, South Carolina had a close 6-point win over Michigan, unranked Michigan, in their season opener, but I'm not going to give that too much weight. I think it'll be I think we could win, but I think it would need a miracle.
They're a very strong team. They have a lot of people who can put up points. I think the biggest threat is going to be towards Audie and Addie and their team.
I think obviously win is the goal, but I think if they were able to keep it within 10 to 15 by the final whistle, I think that would be an overall win. I think Chloe Kitts is their best player. They lost Camila Cardosa last year, but that's about it. So I think Addie Brown will probably be matched up with her. They play a pretty similar style of basketball, and I think Addie's attitude toward the game, Coach Fennelly talked about how she's right on the line of being confident and cocky, which I think in a game like this you need. Whenever she gets a huge block or any sort of big play, you can see kind of a mean mug on her face, and I think that kind of attitude towards a game like this is needed. Who do you think that Iowa State will need to step up and play well to either win or
I definitely think Audie, for sure. I think Sydney Harris will definitely be a little silent killer. I think having her on the bench along with Willie is going to be a great secret weapon that they will have.
Sure, for sure. And I think it should be a fun battle between two really experienced coaches, obviously Coach Fennelly and then Don Staley, who obviously won last year, but those two coaches know how to make adjustments and understand what it takes to win at a high level. So those two kind of battling it out, playing the mental game against each other will also be fun, I think. And then heading into the next game in Fort Myers, less of a test. It's Middle Tennessee. I think this one, the Cyclones will need to play at a fast pace, run the floor. Middle Tennessee has all 5 of their starters play over 30 minutes a game.
Mm-hmm.
So for the Cyclones to keep on rotating those players in and out will be helpful in that one.
No, especially since we don't have we do have a strong starting lineup, but we don't have that 5th player yet.
That's true, for sure. I think it'll be helpful to get some more bench scoring. I know Sydney Harris obviously is the 3rd scorer, and then Kenzie Hare has also knocked down quite a few threes, but Lily Hansford, who averages around 15 points per game, is yet to score this year. I think she's only taken threes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, she is in a little bit of a slump right now. She can definitely do good defensively. Don't get me wrong, but offensively, it's a hard watch, and I'm not surprised she's not getting a lot of playing time. It's just first game jitters. I don't know, but it's pretty rough to watch.
Yeah, and I think depending on how Eiley plays against South Carolina, that'll be her first huge game of her college career. Seeing how she plays, this could be against Middle Tennessee. It could be more of a tune-up game, get back into the groove of things, because playing in an atmosphere against the number 1 team in the country this early into your career is definitely not easy for a freshman.
No, and Brown has definitely recognized that Eiley can make almost all of her threes. If you give her the ball, she's emphasized a lot that she can make almost all of them. So I think having her around the perimeter is going to be great if she can handle these big upcoming games.
Yeah. And, Middle Tennessee has 2 scorers who average 17. The Cyclones have basically the same thing. I think it'll be a battle between the 2 star duos for the teams. I guess I wouldn't call Middle Tennessee's star duo, but they both know how to score the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So last year, Iowa State had a huge test against a highly ranked Iowa team. They played them close. I know South Carolina's probably going to win the game, but ranking-wise, this will end up being a top 10 matchup, more than likely. If they do lose, how do you think that's going to affect Iowa State in the rankings? Do you think they stay at 8? Do you think they fall out of the top 10? How do you think that's going to handle?
I don't know if they'll stay at 8, but I don't think that they'll fall very far.
Yeah.
Maybe 9, 10, 11, one of those 3, just because that's such a good loss against a team that hasn't lost in 40-plus games. So I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think they'll stay ranked. And if they do drop out of the top 10, they can definitely work their way back up. I think they're very resilient.
Yeah. I feel like the men's team might be in the same boat, too. A lot of top-ranked teams, it's those are going to be quality losses if they do lose. But, yeah, a lot of games have happened, really tune-ups to this point, just kind of getting things ready, getting lineups set to go. I feel like the men's roster is going to keep the same starting 5 that they've been rolling with. I feel like Milan, it works better when Milan starts over Curtis Jones. Yep. I don't get it. Curtis Jones is just better off the bench. He starts that one game, doesn't play the greatest, and then off the bench he scores 20. On the women's side, it does feel like they're still kind of experimenting with that 5th starting spot. Who do you guys think that's going to be this week for UNI?
I don't know.
I think they'll probably stick with Kenzie Hare.
Okay.
Coach Fennelly's talked about how she's kind of just a hooper. She goes in with finger roll finishes with a lot of confidence, and I think that the way that she has experience playing in the Big East and started a lot of games last year, I think just having that experience will be helpful in the starting lineup.
I have to disagree. I don't think she's going to do it again. They're very in a routine of always playing 2 games with the same 5th person and then subbing them out. And Coach has made a big deal of wanting to get everybody to play and get a routine going. So I don't know who would fill in, but I don't think it's going to be her.
Okay. Do you think they go back to Eiley Tankey, or is it going to be someone new?
Somebody new,
Okay.
I think.
Sydney Harris.
Yes.
Try her on the starting lineup. Yeah.
I would love to
I'd
have
be
her
intrigued
on.
to see that. Start Audie and Harris together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good. I definitely think,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we got a lot of basketball coming up over Thanksgiving break. Women's team at UNI plays Drake, then number 1 South Carolina, then Middle Tennessee. Men's team has the Maui Invitational. A lot to look forward to over break. Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Daily Dish podcast. We'll see you after the Thanksgiving break with our recap of these games and what's up next. Drive safe, wear your seatbelt, drink water. all that good stuff. We'll see you next time. Happy Thanksgiving.